GIZ.
What's up, everybody?
Hello, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So for those of you out there that are watching and don't know, GIZ is a New York City-based artist and writer who started his career in the 90s and has been very active ever since. So he has a very long career as far as painting in the streets and painting trains and creating art. And so in that sense, he's a bit of an anomaly for a New York writer. And so today we're going to get into his life, and we're excited to have you here, GIZ, and we thank you for taking the time out to share your story with us. So let's get into it. So just to start off, I'd love for you to, tell us a little bit about your roots, where are you from, and where did you first discover graffiti?
So I'm born and raised in Ridgewood, in Queens, and it's close to the Brooklyn border, and lived there pretty much my whole life. As far as graffiti goes, going back to graffiti, as far as I go back, I think is like '86 is when I started like knowing about it, because my cousin who wrote TR, he wrote graffiti and he was older than me, so he used to babysit me and stuff. He was like 7 or 8 years older than me, and when I was hanging with him, it just spilled over, and then I met a lot of people through my cousin, and yeah, that's pretty much how I got into it.
And so you lived in a neighborhood named Ridgewood that was basically the last stop or second to the last stop of the M train. And so you got to see a lot of things just because you were in the neighborhood, because of the time period, and because the trains were so close to your house. Is that correct?
Yeah, I lived in what I call a graffiti writer's playground. I mean, in Ridgewood, you had the M yard, you had back jumps, you had freight trains, you had handball courts, you had very close by the garbage trucks, which were people were getting into for a while. Yeah, and it was close to Brooklyn. It was really a good place to grow up writing graffiti.
And so when you started to become more aware of graffiti through your cousin and through seeing it in the streets, you started to venture out into Bushwick,
Yes.
which was a neighborhood, right next door to Ridgewood. Do you remember what Bushwick was at the time, and how did you feel from going from, like a suburban neighborhood of Ridgewood to sort of a rundown neighborhood like Bushwick?
So I remember like when I was little, and like my first memories are pretty much going into like, it was almost like a war zone. I mean, where I lived, there was nice parks, and it was like, a decent neighborhood, middle class, and you go to Bushwick and it was just empty lots, burnt down buildings, drug dealers, stick up kids, like if you weren't from there, like you didn't belong there, and you would get called out on it. And it was pretty crazy. I'll never forget that. Bushwick nowadays is like, considered cool, but back in the day, it was hood. It was really hood.
Was it, or did you ever feel like it was, you were in danger?
Hell yeah. I got robbed at gunpoint. I got shot at. Of course it was dangerous. It was very dangerous,
So here's an image that I dug up online of Bushwick in that era. And so this just goes, is for people to see what Bushwick looked like in the 80s. And so, I was there as well. And this is what it looked like. When you ride the elevated train line, this is what you'd see going
Yep.
from Myrtle Avenue to Central Avenue to Knickerbocker Avenue. The neighborhood might be, some of it was like this. People are outside, tags are covering the walls everywhere. And you walk around the neighborhood and it looks like this.
Yeah, and one thing that stuck out to me, I remember going to Deck's house, DEK, and he lived on Troutman, close to Knickerbocker, and I remember it was just like kids trying to sell crack, hookers, you know, like, but, you know, not like nice hookers, like, you know, just junkie hookers, stick up kids. It was just all bad. And then you would see like little kids playing, you know what I mean? Like in the midst of all this, just, you know, they growing up there, you know? And I remember feeling like as a young kid, this is probably like in 1988. I was like 10 years old, and I remember feeling like kind of lucky, you know, that I was in a nicer neighborhood. You know, I didn't have to like see that because it was scary.
It was a scary time to be in that neighborhood, especially if you weren't from that neighborhood. It was definitely very much, cliquish with from block to block, people stuck together. If you weren't
Yeah,
from one block and you go onto another block, you might have problems. And one of the big factors, back then was drugs.
drugs and guns. Everybody packed a gun back then. You know, the one thing I remember, like I don't know if whoever's listening, if you guys like heard that song Gangstar made just to get a rep, that song just reminds me of Bushwick. You know what I mean? Like everybody had a gun, everybody wanted a rep, and that's just the way it was. You know, people got robbed and drugs were sold, and that was it.
And the neighborhood was very much known for exactly for that. So you, as a young kid going to that neighborhood, being introduced to the writers, that neighborhood had a tradition of writers. There were lots of well-known writers, that people may or may not know anymore, but some of the folks, some of the writers are on the screen right now. Do you have any recollection of these cats, guys like PG?
Yeah, PG. You know, I met PG when I was very young, and I knew you know Popular George. I knew him for quite some time until he passed away. Rest in peace. And yeah, he was a cool dude. And you know, I remember a lot of the guys from Bushwick, the old guys. You know, like one of the guys I got my tags from was this guy Show MSD. He gave me my tag in 1988, and there's a funny story behind that. I remember going to to his house. That's actually the piece he did in my book. That was it was actually 1988, but he did it like right before New Year's, so that's why he did the 1989 in it. And I went there. My first tag was Pac-Man because you know I was a little kid. I was like 10 years old. I didn't know what I was doing. And he was like, "Yo, you can't write Pac-Man. You know it's like 6 letters. You're gonna get arrested. This and that." And then this guy asked WTO came, and my cousin TR was there, and they started breaking up a cigar, and I didn't know what they were doing because I didn't know what weed was at that time, and they were rolling a blunt. So to make a long story short, they start lighting it up, and I never smelled weed before, so I felt like weird. I didn't know what I was doing. Now everybody was at least 7 to 10 years older than me, and Ast was smoking the blunt, and then he got up and he went to pass it to me, and when he passed it to me, Show jumped up and got all upset and was like, "What are you doing?" And they're arguing back and forth. And I felt like I did something wrong. Like I didn't take the blunt fast enough. I didn't know. That wasn't my place. And he was like, "Look at him. He's a little kid. He's like a little gizmo." And then he was like, "Yo, that'll be a tag, Giz." And he goes, "You're right, Giz for short." And that's how I got my tag.
And so for those of you who don't know, back then Bushwick, the streets were filled with tags. The streets were very bombed, but there were writers that were very active on the trains. And so Show, who you're mentioning now, was very much active on the M trains, which is the local train line that cut through Bushwick, which went all the way to your home in
Yep.
Ridgewood. And so here's an example of a Show piece from 1988, just so people could get an example of his work. And the crew was MSD crew.
Yep.
And here's a photo of REC, who was the crew prez, MSD crew's
Yep.
prez. And so, you remember these guys because you were down with these
Yep.
guys. But both of these guys, both REC and Show, are no longer alive.
That's right.
And so, one of the things that really strikes me about Bushwick was that with that dangerous element, there's a lot of victims to that, to crime and to the streets, unfortunately. But we'll get into that later. So this image here, this is your home train station, is that right?
Yeah. Yes, it is.
So Fresh Pond Road. So here we see a photo of the station, and it looks pretty old, and there's a bunch of names there, and these are some of the guys that you were writing with.
Yeah, those were all my partners, you know, like back in the day. Those are the guys that I really came up with, you know. He said VE, Send, Dessa. You know, I can't even see who's in the picture on the right, but yeah, we all came up together, and the main thing we focused on when we were younger, like I want to say from like 1990 to 92, was trains. We just kept trying to keep that clean train thing going, but Vandal Squad was, you know, on top of everything, and it made it very difficult. And then we just transferred and started doing streets and rooftops and highways and everything else.
And the city at this time was really going through a big wave of bombing. There were
Yeah,
a lot of people active on the streets, and so you see this image, and here are the trains that you're talking about, and
yep,
so this is what you guys are doing before going to the streets, and this is an M train, is that correct?
yeah, it's an M.
And so who's the lineup here? I see it's you. Um,
It's me. That's my brother, Exist, who and this guy Immune from Germany. He came through, and I think that night, I think maybe A1s was with us, and I'm not sure who else. That picture
so
showed up on Instagram. I that's not even my picture of the
so
work.
question for you. It sounds like, from your cousin to your brother, it sounds like writing was in the family. I mean, how common was it for your family or your friends to write?
It was common, you know. My cousin got into it. He got, you know, he was doing stuff. My brother got into it as well. But he got into it more like, you know, like it was. I'll say this: like most graffiti writers, most people that get into graffiti don't last more than 2 years because there's so much negative shit that comes with graffiti. You know what I mean? It's like you got to be like half insane to stick with it. You know, with all the bullshit that comes with it. So like, you know, like I stuck with it because I just genuinely love the adrenaline of it and the bombing aspect to me. Like to me, doing a fill-in, an illegal fill-in, especially if it's on something that's transit, is more fun, or you know, I get more satisfaction from that than doing anything that's artistic or creative. You know, it's just like there's something to it. There's like some energy that just comes out of you and flows when you're just doing a fill-in. You know.
So you're vibing off this energy and you're loving it. I mean, what was your family's reaction to this? I mean, because you're very young and you're out there.
Yeah, not good. You know, I had pretty, you know, strict parents, and they weren't down with me staying out late and stuff. So I pretty much moved out when I was 14. Moved in with my girlfriend at the time, and I basically just like started writing graffiti. Like that became my life, you know. Because when you're full time in it, especially like when you're really going all city, it's a full time job. People think it's like all fun, but it's not. It's not always just fun. It's like, you know, if you're tired, you still got to go. You know, you got to go painting all night, and then you waste all your paint. And then, you know, when you're 14 or 18 years old, you're not buying paint, you're going to rack paint. And that's a whole nother job. And it's a lifestyle you have to keep up, you know, because paint ain't free, you know. So you got to steal it. And then that leads you to steal other shit. It just, so many things spiral off of it. And then
So
if you're going to school, you got to throw that in the mix. So you know, you basically, it becomes your life. It's a full-time job.
so here, I don't know where this photo is
That's
from.
Park Avenue and 116th Street.
Okay, so this is East Harlem.
Yeah, that's that window to the right of the fire escape was kicked out to get access there. And
I
actually,
see it.
so many dope fiends inside that building that we kicked the hole through the wall to get through it, to get to it, because there was just no way to get from one building to the other.
So, here you see a lot of different writers that are up. You're up, Web is up. I see Ever, I see Cost, I see Set. There's a V for Tag as well. If we take a look, I mean, you can see, and then you see this building, and it's a building, like you said, it's a totally an abandoned building that
Yep.
you said is filled with
Building. Yeah, it was totally filled with junkies just squatting and using drugs, you know. And the reason I started at the second level was because that was visible from the train. Because it's like like the picture is right next to that there's a corner right like two houses to the left.
Right, that's by the Long Island Railroad tracks.
Yeah,
So at this point, this is what is this, 1992 or 3 or 4?
that's
What
kind
is
of.
this?
I'm not great with dates, but I would say that's 90 between 93 and 95. But definitely, I don't know, maybe even 94. I want to say.
So what was it like for you as a young writer traveling around the city, doing spots like this, painting, what was that like?
So it was very interesting because up until around 1992, maybe 91, 92, I was pretty much like I would consider like I was like a local guy. Like I would bomb like within a certain radius of my home. I never really wrote in my own neighborhood because I felt like that's not smart. But I did, like Bushwick and like East New York, like things that were within my radius. And then when I met up with Set from KRT Crew, Set's, he had a car which I never had access to, and he took me to like places that were a little bit outside, and I started realizing that the city's big, and like there was writers in other spots, and like once I felt that, I wanted to taste it. I wanted to like go out there and see my name up in different neighborhoods. And I started to go to different neighborhoods and seeing like how different every neighborhood was. Even borough was. Every borough was different, and I got to see a lot of the city. And like when you like I said when you're bombing all day every day, the city's big. Like New York City is a big place, and there's a lot of ground to cover. And when you don't have a car, you're doing it all by transit. And like me and V and SN, like that's a 7-line rooftop. We used to just hide ladders in places because the streets ended up getting so bombed. We would just go above people. We didn't have like the jetpacks that the kids today have, which I think are great. We had like 25-foot ladders that we would stash in places and then carry them on the trains. And like, people would be looking at us like, what are these kids doing at 3 o'clock in the morning with a 25-foot ladder on a train? And it was because we were painting. Yeah, that's a good picture to show you. Like, there was limited space. It was like a lot of graffiti. I don't even know where that is.
This, I would say, must be downtown somewhere just by the
Yeah,
lineup.
yeah,
But this photo is from 1992, just to give folks a reference of time. And you can see, from left to right is Web 113, Claw, GIZ, Zone, TCT that was doing these baby figures, and then Catch on the right, and then all kinds of tags around it, Wiser and some other names. And so this is what downtown New York parking lots looked like at the time. And there's under your name there's layers and layers and layers of other names.
yep.
And so there's a lot of competition to get these spots, I
Well,
would
that's
imagine.
yeah, that's why we started doing the force fields because just doing a filling on a wall was kind of like it was just another filling on the wall. But if you added a force field to it and filled it in really solid, then it became like a stamp more. Like that's a good example right there. That's on Canal Street, like 2 blocks from Soho's at, which is now called Scrapyard.
Right. So the force field that you're talking about, that technique was to sort of block out everything behind it or to
Right.
separate yourself from everything underneath it.
Yep.
And so here you see VE, rest in peace, and yourself, and then you have this silver and black throw up with this white line around it to sort of block it out.
Yep.
And so, this became quite a popular style
Yeah.
at the time.
Now I see, it's been adapted to the point where people are doing clean spots that they have nothing in the background, and people are still doing the force field,
It's
which is
become
cool.
more of a look.
Yeah, yeah, it became like a look, it brings it out.
And
Yeah,
this spot I remember very well. This is Bowery.
yeah, Bowery. This, I think, a part of that VE on the bottom right is still there. The original building, I think, has been torn down and put up with one of them glass cookie cutter buildings that they're making New York look like. But yeah, that was on the Bowery.
So what was it like to be out painting at night and then all of a sudden you get into these gymnastics and you're breaking into buildings or climbing these fire escapes because I guess you guys got tired of being on the street level and you wanted to get more attention.
Honestly, it was so much fun. It was like an adventure all day, every night. You know, even like when you weren't even trying to look for spots during the daytime, you'd just be hanging out. You would end up just seeing shit and be like, "Yo, tonight we got to come back for that tonight." You know, and you'd all feed off each other's energy, and it was like it was a beautiful thing. It was like, you know, that's one thing about graffiti is that it's a free sport. Like everybody has the same access to do the same shit. You know what I mean? There's no like you can't buy your way to get up. You got to get up. You know what I mean? Like it's not about who you know. It's like you got to get up. You know, you might not like the person, but if they're getting up, they're getting up. It's a beautiful. That I love that.
Right. It's about the work ethic.
Yep.
Right. If you don't put in the work, you just don't get the respect.
Right.
And here's some more of, throw-ups from that era.
Yeah, that's a rooftop off the BQE.
Right. So these were coveted spots because now you're going after visibility.
Yep.
And so where did you get this idea from? Was it always around or, what about these rooftops attracted your attention?
Just like you said, you just drive like you end up driving somewhere and you see it and you're like, damn, that would look fresh with a filling on it. Like when you're in that bombing mentality, everything you look at, you in your head, you're like, that shit would look dope with a filling on it. Like it just becomes like more, more, more. Like you can't stop. Like you want to write it on everything. You know,
And there's an element of danger when you're doing this. Do you ever consider that? Because look, this spot here looks pretty dangerous.
yeah, like that spot is, could be very dangerous. I mean, you're standing on a tiny ledge, you're not, you're hunched over. And, I remember doing that spot with VE and the train, because on the side I was painting, you can't see when the train is coming on the other side. You could hear it. But once it passes under you, it's almost like it could almost give you vertigo, like the speed of the train under your feet. Like all of a sudden, like that train is moving right under your feet, and the whole bridge is shaking, because the train's, passing by. You could slip, you could definitely slip. I mean, I know people that have fallen off elevated trains and got hurt really bad.
Right. But that didn't stop you from doing these spots.
No,
Pretty
no.
wild. And so for those of you that don't know, this particular photo is a photo of the train tracks and the these dividers on the Williamsburg Bridge. And so this is very, very high up above water, above the tracks. The catwalk or the walkway where people walk is on the left. So this is a very dangerous spot, but it doesn't really matter. You take the risks.
Yep.
And I think one of the guys that you must have been getting some kind of mentorship from was DG.
Absolutely. I think a lot of people in my neighborhood, I mean, probably everybody in my neighborhood was influenced by DG to some degree. I mean, DG had like a dope, like his crew is called New Wave Crew, but he had like this new wave style, he used to always joke about it. I actually knew DG before graffiti, before he even wrote graffiti, because we were just, from the neighborhood and stuff. And then like I knew who he was, later on. Like I wasn't his friend; he was a little older than me, and he was friends with my cousin, and that's how I ended up meeting him. And then like he just considered me like a little neighborhood kid, and then like started getting up a lot, outside of the neighborhood, and it got back to him, and like we ended up like, it was kind of dope. Like he respected the fact that I went out on my own and like did it. Like I tried to carve out a name for myself, and that was a good one. That was he actually ran in there and got those pics in the daytime.
And
Uh,
this is well after his, his sort of the height of his bombing, because DG was a writer that was very active in the 80s on the bomb trains.
yes, yes,
And so this is way after that. This is almost like a comeback. This, I think, says 1996 on it or something. And so he was, I guess, in and out of writing, but he must have gotten I remember he got like a second lease on writing. Like he came back, and he came back really hard.
yeah. I mean, especially like in Ridgewood, he owned Ridgewood. Like he would smash the same corners over and over, and they would just clean it, and then like the next day, you knew there would be a DG there. It was just he never stopped that shit. He was so funny with that.
He definitely was addicted to graffiti till the
Yep,
very end.
yep,
And when I say to the very end, for those that don't know, and I see it in the comment section, DG Jason Wolf passed away a few years ago. So rest in peace, DG.
yeah.
And here is another, just to celebrate the life of DG, who was our friend and an inspiration to many writers in New York. We're showing a few of his pieces. This is you and DG in 1995.
Yep.
Pretty cool shot. I remember bumping into this train actually at the scrapyard and taking pictures of it myself.
Yep.
And so DG had great style and great enthusiasm and love for writing.
One of the best personalities, man. That guy was such good energy. Always had a good time with that dude. I love that dude so much.
He was a great guy.
Yep. Everybody, there's so many people that passed. Here we go. Like another
And here we go.
three,
So I want to ask you
very
about
close
this.
friends. Three very close friends. Mag, I grew up with, I knew Mag since I was so little. I mean, Asp too, like I said, in 88, Asp was there when I got my tag. Um, I'm the godfather for Mag's daughter. That was my boy. And all three of those guys are up there, with VE, with, everybody. There's so many people passed away.
So all three writers that you see, all three names, all three writers you see on this wall, Mag, Asp, and DG, have all passed away.
Hmm.
And so I want to talk to you a little bit about, not only the danger, but also, the fragility of writers' lives, and, how many writers you've personally lost in your life. And we just saw three, but you lost many more friends, and we've all lost a lot of friends to writing. And I think now people glamorize it because it's so popular, it's trendy now, but that's because they're not writers and they don't really know some of the pain that exists within, our community. And so can you talk a little bit about that and the loss of life that you've experienced or witnessed?
So yeah, I lost a lot of friends, that were writers, and the number is really high. I actually know the exact number, because I've been doing therapy because of some of this stuff. Because you know what, growing up, the way that we grew up in the '90s and stuff, it was a violent era. You know what I mean? It was a violent time, and you just got used to certain shit, and not saying that you didn't feel each loss, but you just thought it was like it became like it was normal. And now being older, I realized that it wasn't fucking normal, because when I talk to people that didn't grow up like me, they just can't believe, like how many people have passed away. You know what I mean? Um,
Yes.
it's not normal. It's because I have the little cards from every funeral that I went to, and my therapist told me to count them up, and I counted them up, and numbers close to 50. So
And you've lost
all of
crew
them were
members, best friends.
yeah. VE was my best friend. When VE passed away, I was spending every single day with him. I was crashing at his house. He had a basement apartment. To this day, his basement is the same way it was since he died, because his mother won't change it. That was her only son. Um, I have clothes there still. I wish I could, but she doesn't want it to be touched. There's rolls of film from the last bombs that we did that she won't let me develop. I don't even know what's on those things. Um, VE was definitely, you know, a hard one, you know, because obviously, everybody knows, he was murdered. Um, he was murdered. His daughter was born right then, and it's an unsolved murder, and it's really sad because I think about it sometimes because he had a big impact on graffiti. He did a lot of crazy spots, and like especially Brooklyn and Bushwick. He loved that area, and he had such a beautiful personality, man. Like he was so much fun. He was a such a genuine person. And I miss him a lot. I miss everybody. There's so many.
And so, speaking of loss and of losing, writers and losing friends, recently we lost Zexor.
Yes, and that was
And
asked.
so, go ahead. I interrupted you. Can you tell us a little bit about Zexor?
Yeah, so Zexor, I remember when Zexor was born. Zexor was my friend Asp's son, and Asp has passed away as well. And 2 days before or 3 days before Zexor passed, I remember seeing him as a little kid, and then I reconnected with him much later on through DG in like 2012-ish maybe. I don't know. I'm pretty bad on dates. And then we stayed friends, and then I mean, Alan, you remember he came down to Florida. We were hanging out with him at the Graffiti Museum, and then like 3 days later, I got the news that he has passed away.
No, it was a terrible tragedy and a terrible loss, and he was very much committed to writing, like yourself,
Yeah,
like all of us, like his father was. I remember his father, and really, really tragic. And one of the things that has been happening uh, within our community is not only are we losing our pioneers and the elders in this movement, but we're now losing a lot of writers very, very young, in their 20s.
yeah,
And so it's a tremendous loss. It's we're living in a tremendously fragile and painful time within our community. It really sucks. It's a really, tough thing to experience. And so I want to change gears a little bit and talk about your piecing, because you not only were a bomber, but then you started piecing and you got more into piecing. And so before we get into that, I just want to, shout out everybody that's on here. Thank you guys so much for spending time with us tonight. My name is Alan Kett, K-E-T. This is GIZ. We are here talking about life and death and graffiti and New York and Brooklyn, because we're both from that area, Brooklyn, Queens, and all the people that came before us. But now we're going to switch it up and talk a little bit about how GIZ made a transformation or a change from a bomber to a piecer. And we're going to share some of that work, and you can, get into it with us. And so what I've really enjoyed about seeing you move in this direction is that you still have in some of your pieces your throw up bombing style,
yeah.
but you flipped it.
Yeah, I love to incorporate the throw up somehow. There's something so unique about a throw up. I was talking about this with my friend Dax the other day. It's like when you start writing, you know what I mean? You got to find a style, and you got to find something that's going to stand out, because you could be, up a lot, but like if your throw up doesn't really stand out, it doesn't have the same impact. Like having a good throw up to me is really important as a bomber. And my throw up was really hard to come up with. It actually came up accidentally. I had a couple throw ups before. I had like a lowercase g throw up that you could see in like videographs and stuff. And then one day I was hanging out with my boy Slash in his basement, and we were just scribbling on papers and stuff because he knew I wasn't happy with my throw up, because I felt like, even though it was like a nice clean throw up, the old one, I just felt like it didn't have that oomph. It needed something. And I started practicing like the what you see there, and Slash did something with his pen where he like rotated, like where you don't lift the paper off, I mean the pen off the paper, And that's where like that little lip where the G to the I came from, because I saw it upside down. I said, "Yo, give me that," and I looked at it, and he didn't intend for it to turn into that, but I just saw something in that, and I was like, "Yo, that's kind of dope," because I knew that could be executed fast because it's one line, and it was
Yes.
unique. It didn't make sense in a way. And then most of my throw up, if you look at it, is like round and curvy, except that line in the Z. Like that has to be straight because it doesn't make sense. It's like a, I don't know, like an anomaly or some shit. I don't know.
Well, you've been able to take it from the throw up that you would do very quickly and then create these fill-ins, these designs within it to turn the throw up into more of a piece like you see here.
Yeah,
Even with, it's very graphic and it's something that you don't really see, uh, people do.
yeah. It's fun.
I mean, and here you see a bit of that as well.
Yeah, so that was for a photo shoot for the front cover of Time Out New York magazine that I was asked to do. And yeah, basically it's just a big throw up. And then like I exaggerated the Z because it just makes it into a graphic, fun thing to do and paint.
It's such a great one, and this is a wall that I think you did with Ghost. Is that right?
No, Ghost was not with me on that wall. I did that wall with Such to my left,
Okay,
and
okay.
yeah, and that was it.
It's bold, and I think we have the cover in here as well, so everybody will get to see that in a moment. What's going on here? Here it seems like you went back to your older throw up style almost.
Yeah, I was just playing around like that. Like, see, like these kind of pieces. Like, I don't have a sketch planned. I just go and like, I basically do a throw up, and then like I'll add shit to it, and I'll make things come out of here and there, and layer it. Like, I just experiment with it. Like sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. But trying new things is how you learn. Different styles.
It has this sort of this funk and a really loose sort of style that when I see a style like this, I think of writers like Ghost that were always very loose and funky.
Yeah, with me with my style, like when I was younger, I was very influenced by the people that painted the traditional style of graffiti, like block letters with arrows coming off a certain way and stuff like that. And then as I started to learn more about like what's out there, and I remember like in like the very early '90s, maybe even late '80s, seeing like some of the wrist stuff, like and I was really impressed because I loved the aspect that it was loose and drippy, and it was just like it had a different flow and vibe than everything else. And I remember like the first time I saw a Ghost piece, and I was like, yo, that shit is fucking fresh. Like it really like triggered something in me, and I started to like shift my style from painting like the pointy-ish kind of letters to like more round and like what I call like more like the wrist style. It's like more cartoony, maybe fun. You know, and it was before I even met any of the wrist guys. And, and I,
Yeah, I mean, I see it in the work. I also see, not only with the rounder, looser style and more the drippy acid kind of a look, but also with the incorporation of cartoons because, Ghost used to do that, Reese used to do that,
yeah,
and so they really understood how to play with, cartoon imagery, whether they were from old, you know, cartoons or whether they made up their own.
right. I think there's something really cool about adding cartoons to kind of simple letters. Also, like you don't have to get too funked out to be funked out. Sometimes less is more. Also, like you just add a little cartoon to a simple thing, and they're both simple, but they bounce off each other nice, and it gives a nice flow.
It's definitely gives impact. So I mean, this is truck is a great truck, and here you see that same concept of loose styles with a cartoon to really sort of make it a complete package.
Yeah.
So, this piece, it looks similar to what is behind you right now.
Yeah, it's actually the same sketch, pretty much.
And so this style now, you're getting, you're starting to add extensions, arrows. It's almost as if you're morphing that older style that you were talking about with this looser style.
Well, yeah. Ironically, it's funny that you say that because what happened was like, I always like to paint simple, like I like that how that's not too colored and it's not too busy. You know what I mean? It's like crisp and clean. So my friends from Brazil were here, As Gêmeos. They came to my house and they were looking at my photo albums and they were like pointing out some of my older styles, which had like those extensions and stuff like that. But they were like very pointed, very rigid, I would say. And they were like, "Yo, these are cool." You know what I mean? Like, and it made me revisit some of those things and add them to the like that style, like which is more roundy. I would call it like more cartoony, like cartoony letters, and I'm having fun with it. I'm really enjoying it.
It's great, and it's very graphic, and I think that's one of those things when you call out those gemios, they definitely have a style that they use sometimes that's very graphic. It's very bold and very graphic from, their use of color to its legibility sometimes, and so it's very effective on the street.
Yeah.
But then you go kind of crazy with The Simpsons. What's your fascination with The Simpsons?
So there's a funny story behind this one. So my boy Dessa, one day, we always like me and all my friends. We have a pretty hard sense of humor. We bust each other's balls all day. You know what I mean? So one day he was busting my balls and he was saying that my throw up looked like Homer Simpson's head. And like one day I was like joking around and like I drew my throw up with Homer's head and like his beard was like the bottom of the G and it kind of worked. And it was I wasn't really into drawing cartoons. I didn't know how to draw cartoons and I always wanted to learn. So I was like, let me use some references from The Simpsons or whatever. And then I started morphing it into what you see now, which was like I would add like different elements, and then I turned it into Bart. I would add like sexy Marge or something, and it was just really fun to do, and it helped me get a basic of like cartooning a little bit, like a better sense of you know face expressions and things like that.
I mean, you've really run with cartooning ever since, starting off with Homer Simpson.
Yeah.
Here's just so folks know, just to reference that piece on the cover of Time Out New York that you were mentioning before, which is a really big deal for a bomber to get commissioned to do a cover of a magazine.
Yeah, it was funny, like when that dropped, because Time Out New York was a free publication that was like handed out, throughout, New York City subway stations, newsstands. It would be all over the place. And I remember when that dropped, people were just messaging me like, "Yo, I just saw your shit on Time Out New York," and like everybody was like, because I didn't really tell anybody about it, so it was kind of bugged out. Um, that
Very, very, very forward thinking of them to do that. And, they know what was up. They're paying attention. So here we have a bit of a shift. We have an older piece, but this is a wood cutout.
Yeah, that's actually my very first art piece that I've ever made. Like for that was made for a gallery. And I think I want to say that was either 97 or 98. And I didn't really know what I was doing. I basically just grabbed that's a piece of MDF that was bleached. That's why it looks lighter. And I just did a throw up on it. I colored it in actually with colored pencils and just outlined it with a Sharpie. And and then just cut out that background. I didn't really know what I was doing, or how to do shit like that. Like I just knew how to do graffiti. Like I didn't know how to do graffiti art. I knew how to do graffiti vandalism. And yeah, and that was the first piece that I ever did.
So it's a very different thing from going out bombing in the streets to deciding to do a piece of art at home. What got you to go in this direction?
So it's funny you say that because actually the way that it started was this. I got a call from a gallerist, this guy Martinez. He was doing a show that was called Old School versus New School or something like that. And I didn't, I didn't know, like he called and I hung up on him because I thought, at that time I was really paranoid with the Vandal Squad, and I thought he was Vandal Squad trying to like trick me. And then I found out he got my number through a mutual friend. And he talked me into like doing this thing, and he's telling me there's money to be made in it, and I was just like, but I don't really care about that because at the time I had a different hustle, and I don't know, I just ended up doing it because I honestly I thought it was dope to be in the show with all these really old school writers who I became great friends with, like Case Two and Tracy 168. It was really dope to meet those dudes, and be a part of a show with them.
So that was the start, and fast forward, you sort of figured it out.
I don't know if I figured it out. There's I don't. There's always room to learn. I'm just gonna just keep pushing it. Keep pushing through.
So here you have a piece in someone's home, and it's your throw up. It's back, but you
Yeah.
figured out how to do it rather in a design kind of way that makes sense. It's dope.
Yeah, I mean, and that's another thing, like the transitioning of using, because being a graffiti writer, you end up using markers. That's what you're basically used to from black books and stuff. And then it's a big transition to learn how to use a brush, like and to paint with a brush is a to me, it's a lot different. It's I wouldn't say it's harder. It's like learning a new tool, and the patience, like Ryan MSK taught me a lot about that with the brush, because I was always getting frustrated with it because each color with acrylics especially, it's like transparent, and then you got to paint it like 4 times, and sometimes people don't realize the amount of work that goes into that, like that, like those colors, like the yellows and the oranges. I probably painted each one of those 4 times to make it that opaque. So it's time consuming, and but it's nice to do. It's relaxing, and I enjoy it.
And so this is in someone's home, a lucky person. And then here you have a piece that's at currently at the Museum of Graffiti, and this is a totally different technique. Can you talk a little bit about this?
So yeah, so that was part of the installation for the room that I did with Ghost, and initially, we were asked to do an installation that was based on only throw ups because me and Ghost are known for doing throw ups and making our throw ups fancy, if you want to say. So my idea with this sculpture was to just the simplicity of just doing the outline of a throw up, the basic essentials of a throw up, which is like a nice outline with the shadow, and I wanted to make it 3 dimensional so that it it gives, like, when you look at it from the side, you kind of like see the curvatures and you realize like the movement of it. It's like the flow of the throw up. When you're doing it, it's got to have like a rhythm, to be executed properly and fast. And so it's made of high grade plywood. It's 6 feet wide, I think, by almost 4 feet tall, and weighs about 200 pounds. It's 11 pieces of 1 inch plywood that are stacked together and pressed together. It was a lot of work. It looks simple and all that, but there's a lot of work went behind that.
It's a very large piece. It's a beautiful piece. We're presenting it at the museum, and people come in and they love it. They're in awe of it. They love the installation that you guys did, and sort of the fun, whimsical nature of it, and how the letters are dripping and overlapping. It's very playful and cool, and it's a style that people really relate to. And one of the things that I tell people is that this, the throw up is, hated by many, but also loved by many. Kids understand it. They do it, right? They do bubble letters. They might not understand how to do it expertly, but it's something that everybody sort of goes through. And so when they come across this room they can see mastery, and when they come across this sculpture, it blows their minds because now you've brought in a different art form, woodworking and sculpture making, but you've tied it into graffiti, and it's something very unexpected for folks when they visit.
Yeah, and I have new ones, new wood sculptures that are in the works that are coming out that are based off of some of the black and white algorithm stuff that I've been doing with the little zigzags coming off, like kind of like that. So my next sculptures are going to be related to those, which is going to give it a lot of movement. The first one was basically just the simple throw up, just the stamp, as you want to call it, and the next ones are going to be like this with movement and more playful. Like to me,
Excellent.
you don't really have to love a throw up or like graffiti to like that. It's just basically cartoony. Nobody, it doesn't have to make sense. It's just appealing to people, even if you don't appreciate graffiti. I think.
No,
My,
I think it's very clever. It's very graphic. It's very well executed. It has graffiti roots in it, but like you said, it could be something else, right?
yeah,
It touches a lot of points, and so, I think that that's part of what people really love about your studio work is that, yeah, I'd have to agree with Dax that it has a sexiness to it. It has a playfulness to it. It's sexy. It's fun, and also it's very clever. And so, folks, it's we have a few minutes left in this talk. We're here talking to Giz about his artwork, his career, his sort of transition from the streets to the studio, and I'd like to open up the floor to any questions. There's a lot of folks checking in with us here today. We've got Dax, we've got Wonder, we've got Paid, so many people. We've got Dual. I think I saw Easy. And so, are there any questions from folks that maybe don't know uh, about Dual, or about Giz, or about any of this world, and about his work? We've got a few more minutes left, so we're open to questions if you have it. If not, we'll keep talking on our own. All right, so folks, any questions here? We got a question here. Let's see if it's a serious one or if it's a joke. Uh, is there a book coming? Have you considered doing a book?
yeah, I have considered doing a book. I'm trying to gather my photos together. Over the years, I've lost photos. That's the one thing I regret. I tell this anybody that is doing this and is doing it as a career, take photos, because I made that mistake and I did not. I have photos from my friends, but I'm missing so many good photos that I wish I had. But yeah, I would love to do a book because I would like to do a book. Also, I have, from the people that passed, I have so many great stories that need to be told of experiences with them and the things we've done, and just interesting stories. We lived such a crazy, young, youthful life, and
Yes.
I need to tell that. I need to tell those stories. They need to be out there.
Someone asked if you've ever painted freight trains.
Yeah, there's a big freight yard that was where I grew up. I used to paint freight trains all the time. A lot of fun. Not like painting a steel train, but it's still great. There's nothing like painting a train. To me, that's like the ultimate thing to paint.
So another question is, would you do it all over again?
Hell yeah. But I would do it more, I think. I would probably throw away careers faster. But what it is, like everyone glorifies graffiti now, but the truth is back in the day, man, like when you met somebody that wasn't a writer, you didn't want to tell them you wrote graffiti because they looked down upon it. Nowadays it's cool. It's like, it became hip, in a way, or whatever. Like, it's corporate companies are looking at it, to use it. It wasn't like that when I grew up, and it was like, "You're a graffiti fucking loser." You know what I mean? That was like the comment that came, like under someone's lip.
Right. So another question is, do you have any plans on releasing any prints, any new prints coming up?
Yes, we spoke about doing a print with the museum, so we're gonna work on that. I'm not sure when exactly that'll be.
Right, so you guys stay tuned with us. Join our mailing list. You'll get some information on that. We're still figuring it out, but we do have a print program, and so we'd love to do one with GIZ. Also, questions about who are some of your favorite writers now that you're seeing?
I mean, writers, current writers, or growing up?
Current writers.
There's a lot of. I mean, right now it's kind of crazy. I mean, it's the COVID era, so there's so many people out writing. Like to me, like my favorite bomber of all time, who became my close friend, is J.A. The guy never stopped. The guy's like one of the most consistent bombers ever. But yeah, there's a lot of people painting right now. Graffiti's so political. I mean, I don't even want to get into shouting out.
All right, let's see. There's some more questions here. We don't really have, craziest bombing mission, stories like that. I would say we don't really have much time for those. If you want to maybe give us a small story, we have about 2 minutes left.
All right, crazy bombing stories. I remember painting a fire escape, on the 7 line, and I remember, the window opened up, and right away, this like Colombian dude on the 7 line, he just whipped out a gun, put it right to my face, and he thought I was actually robbing his house. But he realized, I said, "Yo, I'm just writing graffiti, man," and I held up the paint, and he said something in Spanish, and I was like, "Yeah, I don't speak Spanish," and he was like, "Oh, okay," and he told me to write his name, and then that was it. He went back in his house, and I finished my shit.
Very lucky.
Yeah, I could have went the other way.
Yeah, and it's funny that that you mentioned that kind of a story, because there have been writers that have lost their lives under similar circumstances.
Yeah, absolutely. No,
Unfortunately,
I think I'm very fortunate. I mean, I've had a lot of violent things. I've been stabbed multiple times, multiple occasions. I've just been lucky, I'm lucky that I'm still here. But I guess that's because assholes live forever.
So GIZ, we're wrapping it up. Thank you so much for spending time sharing your world and your history with all of us today. We really appreciate it, and we appreciate what you do and have done for this art movement, the art that you continue to create, and you being a true original. And so we thank you.
Thank you.
And so, of course, and so everybody, we're wrapping up. Thank you so much for joining us today for the Art Talk. Our next Art Talk will be on Monday. It'll be a surprise guest, so check in with us again. If you haven't, join our mailing list, check out our website, pick up a book, learn some history, and thank you so much. Good night.